Go live, but no, I need to get Zoom back.
And I see that you are live on my Zoom screen.
Oh, it started recording. All right.
And you are live in the group now.
Awesome. Thank you. Uh, welcome, welcome. This is Gluten Free Myth Buster. This is the Gluten Free Myth Buster Challenge. It's kind of a tongue twister there. The Gluten Free Myth Buster Challenge Day 3. Yay! If you're here, you've made it. Give yourself a pat on the back. We've had 2 very powerful days, and we've been digging in deep and dealing with some very tough challenges. Actually, going gluten-free isn't necessarily easy. It's really a part of our society and kind of who we are. So it's really, really tough to do. And so we've been working on breaking free from society's myths and committing to what we want. That's ultimately really the goal that we want. It's like, what do we really want? We kind of have to dig deep and let go of the things that are being forced upon us. Society, friends and family, I mean, they all kind of dictate their wants on us. We're always trying to change people, not necessarily on purpose. It's just kind of the way that we're designed. And so it gets important for us when we want to take care of ourselves to dig deep within and discover, what do we really want? And then we have to commit to that. So we've been working on defining that commitment. And then yesterday we worked on supporting that commitment with our why statement. It's like, why do we want to commit? And we also worked yesterday on discovering what our foundational emotions from childhood are. And when we discover what those are, that means we can look deeper and go into blocks that we may have that block us from supporting or attaining the goals that we want. And so this is in every aspect of our life, but it runs very strongly with going gluten-free in food as well. Food is very closely tied with our emotions and very closely tied with our childhood as well. So that's where some conflict comes in. So if we dig deep and look at kind of these blocks and these emotions, and we did that yesterday, it helps us in supporting our health and understanding where some of our blocks are so that we can break through them and actually reach the goals that we set before us. And so that is not easy to do. So I want to say congratulations to everyone who's been on this journey the last 3 days with me, because you've taken some big steps in committing to learning about gluten-free and putting them into place so that you can support a gluten-free lifestyle. Now, we blew away some big gluten-free myths for sure. A lot of ones that I think a lot of people might argue. Particularly people who are not gluten-free would argue that they're true. But when you do go gluten-free and you talk to people who have successfully done it for years, they're not true. They're not true at all. What they are is they're huge major blocks based on fear. And so we are going to blow away one more myth today, myth number 3. And hopefully that this is all motivation to help you, if nothing else, to take charge of your life and discover your best self and your best health. And I want to extend a big thank you to Christy. Thank you for joining us these last 3 days. I've really appreciated that. We've had a lot of fun. Did you have any takeaways or anything you wanted to say about the last 3 days before we continue on?
Well, I mean, I have loved it all, and I have learned a lot from you. I really thought that yesterday was really, really valuable in, when we try to break through these blocks, when we're trying to make our change, is, looking at, why we're having these blocks. And even as far back as into our childhood, it's amazing because we really don't relate them, right? Mm-hmm. And looking that far back and the emotions and everything, I thought was extremely valuable, and it really got me thinking too, in my own personal journey. So I really thank you, and I appreciate that.
You're welcome. And it is really key, because what happens is a lot of times we try to separate ourselves from our childhood, right? I'm not that person anymore. I'm not in that family anymore. And it's almost like we put up this block and say, it's not going to affect me anymore. But the more that we distance ourselves from our childhood, the bigger block we put up, and the more unaware we become of how what we learned as a child affects our subconscious day-to-day activity. They say, the experts say that 95% of our functioning is done on a subconscious level. That is kind of autopilot, that we just keep doing the same thing over and over and over. In fact, one of my mentors is Derek Rydell, and I love one of his sayings is, it's like, we don't live 75 years, we live one life 75 times, unless you consciously kind of wake up and change it. So that is really how powerful it is. So you are absolutely right. And it's a great place to start, because your childhood absolutely connects to who you are today.
Absolutely.
Better and for worse. It's both. It's not good or bad. It just is, right? So if you want to change it, you have to go back and look at that, because you're not going to get very far if you don't, because then that's a block. That's that emotional block that we're trying to prevent. So absolutely. So if you've missed the first two videos, if you're watching this right now and you're joining us for the third day, that is awesome. I love it. We're glad you're here, but you really want to go back and watch the first two videos, because each one kind of builds on the other. So I would start off with that first video and then go to the second one, because the first myth is kind of big, and I don't even like to say it outside of that first video, because outside of the context, a lot of people don't even necessarily quite understand it, because it's right, it's conflicting. So watch video number 1 and video number 2. Be sure to go back so that you get all this information, and it can help you to kind of transform your view of going gluten-free. So today we're gonna learn what myth number 3 is. But first, I want to continue on with our action plan. So we've kind of been working on an action plan for taking charge of our health successfully. And so with that, that's that commitment that we talked about. Day 1, we got real, and we needed to ask ourselves what we're committed to. And that's kind of cleaning out the junk. It's like, if you want to get serious about going gluten-free, you really have to dig deep and go serious. It's like, what are you really committed to? Because the biggest block is that we don't want to give up gluten. We want to eat what we want to eat, right? I mean, I had a guy who called me up once, and it's like at work where I do brain training, neurofeedback. And he's just like, I need help. I'm falling apart. My life is a mess. I have every diagnosis under the sun. And I said, well, what are you eating? He said, I'm going to eat whatever I damn well want to eat. And I think he hung up on me. And it's like, okay. I can see a couple emotional blocks there, and I kind of know probably when they started, and they weren't right now. But it is really important, because if you do have that block like he has, he worded it perfectly. I have a lot of it, he's falling apart. You start falling apart. It happens slowly. And as we get older, it starts happening more quickly, and things start compounding. So that's why we really want to learn how to take care of ourselves. And the most basic, which seems a little bit strange to me as a mom, the most basic things that we can teach our kids, besides teaching them that attachment and love and nurturing that way, but is how to eat healthy and how to have healthy sleep habits. Two things really, as a mom. And they're probably the two biggest things that are overlooked in our culture right now in teaching our kids. And so when we want to improve our health, when we want to transform our lives, whether it's mental health or physical health, it doesn't really matter, because it all comes to the two basics. We want to start eating healthy. That's where we want to begin. And we want to have a good sleep and rest cycle. And that involves a lot of other things and another talk. So right now we're really focusing on food. And so yesterday, we also discussed, mostly on Monday, how gluten negatively impacts the body. That's kind of what we focused on Monday. And did you know that gluten can contribute to or make worse or cause over 200 different medical conditions? I mean, that's kind of crazy. If you look at the food and how basically infested, if you want to use the word, our food is with gluten. I mean, because they put gluten in everything. The biggest problem is gluten isn't like a large percentage of the food out there, but when you eat processed food, they put gluten in everything. I mean, gluten is on French fries. They put gluten on meat. They bread it. They put gluten in cheese. There's gluten in cheese. Jimmy's Subs I got sick from eating a lettuce wrap there once. I suppose it could have been contaminated too, but I found out actually their cheese has gluten in it. They put wheat in it. So it gets put in everything, and it's used as a filler, and it's used as a crisper, and it's used as a texture enhancer. So it's used for a lot of different things, but that's why it gets really difficult to get away from this wheat. And so we discussed a little bit about how most digestive experts, even health experts, nutritionist experts, and traditional doctors, they pretty much agree that you want to minimize processed food. And so grains are processed food. So gluten gets tacked right along in there. So even traditional medical doctors recommend limiting that for sure. Most digestive experts, however, know that gluten isn't healthy and that it does a lot of damage to the intestines and that it should not be included in the diet. If you're looking at the more, the doctors who focus solely on the gut and the intestines. And there's some amazing doctors out there. There's Dr. Perlmutter, there's Dr. Hyman, there's Dr. Axe, there's Dr. Tom O'Brien. And they're probably all nationally recognized as leading doctors if you want to follow any of these. I think them all. They're great. And so then we really want to dial down and look at our why. Why do we want to do it? We want to make this commitment, but then what is supporting that commitment? What do you really want out of life? Why do you want that health? And so it's different for everybody. And a lot of times it's just as simply as, which isn't as simply, it's everything, but it's feeling healthy, feeling good, having that energy, being able to do what you want, and being able to think clearly. Because gluten, one of its neurological aspects is it messes with the mind. It causes inflammation. And what gluten does is that it slows. Scientific research has shown that the consumption of wheat gluten slows the blood flow to the prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex is right up here. It's the thinking part of the brain. And this is our action, thinking, doing, cognitive part of our brain. And so when it slows that blood flow, we aren't getting oxygen to our brain. Our thinking can become fuzzy and it's unclear. And it's also important to note that a lot of disorders involve slowing blood flow to the prefrontal cortex. So when we're looking at ADHD diagnosis, that's a symptom, lack of slow blood flow to the brain. It's not getting enough to stimulate it. We look at depression. Depression absolutely is not getting enough blood flow to the prefrontal cortex. And so there's other symptoms as well, PTSD, everything that hangs out kind of in the lower frequencies, I would guess might be tied to that lower blood flow. And so that's not a good thing. That doesn't help us to be who we want to be and to think clearly. So that is really important. And so after we get past all of what gluten does, it's like then yesterday is what Christy was talking about when we tried to really focus on what emotion got brought up when we thought about not eating gluten forever. And so some people find it even a hard concept to imagine. And so, and if that's the case, there's emotional blocks, because you can successfully eat without gluten and have an incredibly happy, successful, wonderful life. It's not really tied into happiness. Gluten and happiness are not together. So, and that is an emotional block. And so we want to look at our childhood beliefs and kind of note what our primary emotion is and figure out what those blocks are, so we can have that motivation to succeed, so that we kind of process them and get rid of them. So in my Food Freedom for Life program, this is where I often spend a lot of time with my clients. We start digging deep and uncovering blocks that have been reoccurring in their life. When you have these emotional blocks, it's not just with food. Food is a big trigger, however, because food is very emotional. but it stops them from achieving a lot of the goals that they want, whether it's in relationships, whether it's in work, whether it's personal fitness. It's really important to look at these emotional blocks, these emotional beliefs, figure out where they come from, and we want to process them and then be able to let them go and then figure out our strengths and then move forward from there. And that really helps us to empower us to take charge of our life and to move forward and to actually break that cycle, that kind of running around on this rat wheel, kind of always experience the same thing over and over and over in a million different ways. So that's really important. And we can kind of let go. The outside forces can be, and we can still stay focused. We don't get distracted by everything around us. It's also really important to know that when you're on this gluten-free journey, that it's not your fault at all that your body can't digest gluten. This is super important to understand. There's no blame. I know when I first was so sick, it's so frustrating and you get so mad. And when you think everybody else is eating gluten and everybody else's body can manage it fine, you think that something's wrong with your body, but it's not really your body's fault. Gluten is very hard to digest. And even in its original state, as we've learned from Dr. Tom O'Brien, which we discussed in video 1, that it puts holes in your intestines to begin with. So it's really tough on the intestines. So it's not your body's fault that you can't process gluten. And we also can't control the companies and the way that they market the addicting junk to everyone, and particularly our kids. We can't control that, but we can decide what we nourish our body with. And if you want support transitioning into a dedicated gluten-free lifestyle, I can help you. So, and hopefully this 3-day is helping you right now to kind of bust through some of these major blocks. I'm giving you very key points and how to kind of take this on your own and break through them. So I'm going to move on to action plan number 3. So we've just discussed, we've had our commitment, we've discovered our why, and we're discovering that we really want to focus on health. That is really what we want. If you don't want that, I guess you probably don't really have to worry about going gluten-free. So then you're done and you can go. But if you want that health, if you want your health to be the best that it can be, we're moving on to step 3, and that is planning. Step number 3 is planning. You really need to make a plan if you want to go gluten-free, because we've talked about it. It's all we've been talking about really the last 3 days is how difficult it is to go gluten-free, whether it's emotional or actually physically finding food and eating it. You're going to find pretty quickly when you start your gluten-free journey, if you haven't already started, that it's pretty difficult to walk just into any restaurant and get food. It's going to be a little tricky, or even a store without a plan. You need a plan. I mean, even I've been gluten-free for over 12 years, and I honestly said, right, I don't really feel the limitations. I have it under control. I kind of forget that I'm gluten-free. So in that mode, I guess that makes sense now. I just explained to myself what happens. Like on vacation, when I'm in a totally different area, I live up in Minnesota. We went down to Alabama, down to the ocean, which was fantastic. But I walked into a grocery store to get some food for the road trip on the way home. And it's like, I didn't necessarily have a plan. I just walked in there ready to buy stuff, but it was kind of like my head spinning. Whoa, what can I eat? It's like, I can't find anything to eat. I mean, that's kind of, I didn't have a plan, and right, I guess like I forget that I'm gluten-free. So I don't know. So it kind of caught me off guard, but we got things because I have plans in place and for travel, and there's certain foods that we eat, I kind of know I could like refocus and, go get some hummus, go get some vegetables, go get some chips, and get the things that I needed to snack on for the trip. But without a plan, your head's going to be spinning, I think, and it's going to be hard to get that focus. It's going to be a lot more frustrating, and it's going to be really hard to be successful, because you do need to plan things. And even with restaurants, which restaurants are getting a lot easier now because they have gluten-free menus. when I started over 12 years ago, they weren't very popular to have gluten-free menus. You would have to talk to the waiter and the chef, and they would have to do things, help you get a good meal or not. But now they have gluten-free menus. And so you can go and just check out a menu. And I can tell you that a red flag for me on a menu, just a little tip here, if you're eating gluten-free, when they just have, they say, yes, we have a gluten-free menu, but then you get the menu and there's nothing on it that's gluten-free except for one salad. And that's a red flag that they don't really understand gluten-free. They kind of just threw on there what they thought was gluten-free, the safest thing. But that being said, I've also been proven wrong a little bit, where I'm like, okay, I'll ask somebody, they'll have a couple salads maybe, and that's it, or maybe like a fish dish. And I'll say, do you have gluten-free bread? And they'll be like, oh yeah, we have gluten-free buns and we can make anything gluten-free. And it's like, whoa, well, how come you don't say that on your menu? Or they say, what? I don't know what you're talking about. And that can also be a clue that you might want to go to another restaurant, particularly if you're worried about cross-contamination. But the person you really want to talk to at a restaurant is typically the manager. The manager knows whether or not that they can make gluten-free and whether the chefs are capable or not. So, but that's kind of digging in deep. But you want to plan, and you have to talk to people. But when you have the plan, it's much easier. And so once you get your good restaurants, you're kind of good to go. I mean, you get the plan in place and it becomes so much easier. You know where the good food is. And it's just kind of like choosing a restaurant. In some degree, it's like choosing a restaurant anyways. You find out where the good food is and you go, right? So we don't have to make going gluten-free to be totally different than just going out and finding good food. It's kind of the same thing. So, we want that plan. And so this is where support comes in, and it gets really handy. So if you have a friend or a buddy, or find a mentor or a support group, somebody who's familiar with gluten-free, latch onto them. Ask for their help. Ask what they eat. Ask for their menus. Ask for their recipes, because this is going to help you immensely. And moving forward, it takes away the frustration, it gives you some insight, and it helps direct you in what to do and where to go. And so that makes things much easier, because when I first started out again, right, it was new, and I didn't really know a whole lot of people who were gluten-free, and it was difficult to find these things. And I would have loved to have somebody kind of who knew the ropes help me out and direct me in the grocery stores and kind of get me set up with meals. So, okay, so we're getting to myth number 3. We're going to bust myth number 3. Number 3. When eating gluten-free, this is myth number 3. The biggest one, of the third myth out there, is that there's nothing to eat. And you hear this all the time. It's like, what do you eat? There's nothing to eat. You're going to starve. You're going to go hungry. And I think people out there probably say, hey, no wonder you're so skinny. You don't eat anything. And that's not really true. And for us fellow gluten-free people that have been doing it for a while, guess what? We love food. And we eat a lot. So it's not true, but we don't eat the gluten, and gluten adds inflammation, weight gain, and all sorts of different things. It's really tied in with joints, achy joints, pain in the joints as well. And so it feels like, all these myths kind of overlap a little bit. It's all like, there's nothing to eat. There's nothing good. You're never going to eat good stuff again. And none of that is true. Like I said, out of all the food in the world, gluten is just a little small percentage of it. But in our society, we overfocus on it and make it everything. And so that's the problem. So when you shift out of that, like you say, yesterday I talked a little bit how we're eating better than we've ever eaten before. We're eating the best food than we've ever eaten. We eat organic, grass-fed, quality, fantastic tasting food. And we eat a lot. And in the beginning of our journey, when I was kind of stuck and I was trying to figure this out, I kind of went to the opposite spectrum and said, you know what, fine, food's not that big of a deal. We don't need it. I don't want to focus on it. I think this is common. I know how many lots of moms are like, they just eat salads and kind of ignore that they need food. And they just, will eat a salad here and there, like that's okay, whatever, it doesn't matter. But that's not going to sustain you. And what I actually really learned is that the complete opposite. It's like, no, food, we're meant to eat 3 times a day. We're designed as humans to eat 3 times a day. Therefore, food is really a big part of our life. It's meant to be a ritual. It's meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to be celebratory. And it's meant to be almost sacred, actually, because it's what fuels our bodies. It's what bonds us together. So all those things that created these emotions of sadness and loss, you're absolutely right, but it's not tied to gluten. These rituals are not tied to gluten. They're tied to nourishing our body with healthy, real, and whole food. So that's where the mistake and the confusion comes in. And so I can tell you, after being gluten-free for 12 years, I can say I still entertain, I still have parties, and food is probably even more of a big issue. And as the seasons in the summer, it's like fantastic. It's like the berries are out. I just made that strawberry pie. And it's like, I make jelly, not a whole lot because it does have a lot of sugar, but I do with the berries. It's fantastic. I use a little sugar, but canning and gardening, and it's a delight to the senses, actually, and to our digestive system to have like all these different fruits and vegetables that are available to us in the summer. It's like the bounty is just beginning. It's like very exciting. And so when you break free from this gluten piece and kind of the run, run, run and go, 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 and kind of keep food as like irritating necessity where you have to eat it on the run, kind of. I mean, I think that's kind of how our society treats it, or as like a treat or a hit that's going to rush your sugar and serotonin and give you a charge of like feel good and then crash you later, typically is what it does if it's doing that. And that's not really how food was meant to be designed. That's how it's created by food companies to keep us addicted to it and wanting that rush. But that's not really how food was ever meant to be, I do not believe. It was meant to be a part of our life, a part of celebration, a part of nourishment, a part of a ritual 3 times a day where we sit down, where we relax, where we connect to nature, we connect to ourselves, we connect to family, and we connect to organic food that was created for our consumption. That's really what food is about. And so when we have that fear that there's nothing to eat, it is so far from the truth. It really is. There's just one thing we're not eating, and that's wheat. Wheat and barley and malt, I believe, are like the main the main grains. And honestly, who eats a ton of barley and malt? I mean, I don't know. I do like my malt vinegar, but I can live without it. It's not been a problem. So, and I want to give you a little bit better example about this, about how food, that there's nothing to eat, and see if this is a little bit more concrete, an example that makes a little more sense. And one, I know people who are very committed to going gluten-free, and there's no judgment in this whatsoever, but when the holidays roll around, they're like, I'm not gluten-free for the holidays. It's like, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. It's like they like jump ship. So that's where that commitment comes in. They don't have that commitment to health. But if we look at it and look at the holidays, it's like, I'm going to take Christmas when we celebrate Christmas here in America, and I'm going to take kind of the classic menu. People think that they can't eat gluten-free because they're going to miss out on all the good stuff at Christmas time. Well, I'm taking just this is pretty standard holiday Christmas dinner. And number one, turkey. Gobble, gobble. Turkey is naturally gluten-free. Now, people like to put a lot of rubs because I was just down south and they love their barbecue, and it was pretty hard to find barbecue without a wheat rub. Actually, I'm not sure if I found one, but I did find great food. But they don't typically, I've not found that they put wheat on turkey. You rub it down with a bunch of herbs and olive oil and lemon, and let me tell you, it tastes fantastic. Turkey's gluten-free, naturally gluten-free. You can have your turkey. So woohoo, yes. And that side, what goes on that side, the most popular side, mashed potatoes and gravy. Guess what? That's gluten-free. And your gravy can be made gluten-free really easy by swapping out your wheat flour with rice flour. Boom, no difference, no expense. And also this goes with that expense piece as well. There's Rice flour might even be cheaper than gluten. I don't know. Maybe not. Depends on where you get it. If you get it in the Asian aisle, a little rice bag, yeah, it's going to be cheaper, but it depends. But anyways, you got your turkey and mashed potatoes and gravy, gluten-free, almost naturally gluten-free. Then you can get your sweet potatoes smothered in marshmallows. Yum, yum. Guess what? It's all gluten-free. Naturally, you don't have to miss out. And then you throw in your green beans. Green beans are naturally gluten-free. Now, I know there's a holiday dish where people add some soup and some crispy onions on top, which I like. I like mushrooms and lemons maybe better and almonds on them. But if you really had this hunkering in for like these fried onions, Aldi has them. And you can put them on there. I actually bought them once, but I did never use them. I gave them to the food shelf. I'm like, you know what? It's one of those things like, yeah, because everybody does it. It's like, yeah, I got these crispy onions. And then when I got them home, it's like, do I really want to eat them? No, I gave them away. But, you know, they're there. But green beans are naturally gluten-free. And that's my point. Then you have cranberry relish. Yum. I make my own now with fresh cranberries and orange and apple and a little bit of honey. Oh my gosh, everybody loves it. It's their favorite. But when we started out, nobody ate it. So this is important to know that when you change your diet, you know, people are used to what you've been feeding them. And so when you change it, they're probably going to notice and they might not like it. But if you just keep feeding it to them, they'll shift. Everybody changes. And like with this cranberry relish, this fresh, crunchy relish, it was fresh. Everybody's like, eh. Now it's everybody's favorite. Go figure. It changes. So don't worry about that. And then we get down to pumpkin pie and apple pie. And yes, this has some gluten in it, but you know what? You can easily swap out a frozen crust, a gluten-free crust for a regular crust like that. Minutes, seconds. It's going to cost you maybe a couple bucks extra. We're not looking at an extravagant price here. You get your ice cream on top of there. And you've got Christmas dinner, and guess what? Pretty much gluten-free, and you're not really missing, what are you missing out on? Not really a whole lot. Now, people will say rolls. We're trying to edit out the processed grains anyways, and there's so much food I don't even want to waste. I personally don't want to waste my tummy space on filling it up with bread because I just listed like a whole list of yummy things that I want to get into my tummy that day that I don't need to fill it up with bread. But if you wanted bread, there's great mixes out there like Pamela that you can make that use yeast, and you just kind of mix it together and let it rise. My daughter's done it, and pull it fresh out of the oven. If you eat them fresh out of the oven, they're awesome. That's the trick with gluten-free bread. You need to eat it warm right out of the oven. The texture can get a little funky after that. But if you're serving them warm or heating them up in the microwave, people will probably consume them without too much complaint. And if there's a complaint, they don't have to eat it, right? But so this is just a little example. So hopefully it helps that when people get kind of panicky and say like there's nothing to eat, it's like I took one of the biggest holidays that we have and I had all the classics on it, and you can eat them all. So you want to get to the cookies and all the treats and everything. It's like I make tons of gluten-free cookies. I try to edit them down. I still eat way too many. I've gone to grain-free, but when I do make them and I do bring them out to people that don't know that I'm gluten-free, nobody really knows. They can't really tell for the most part, depending on the cookie that I make. They just say, wow, this is really good. What is it? It's gluten-free. So it's very workable. It's very workable. It seems like a big panic, but when you start digging in deeper, you can eat a lot of stuff. That myth is not true. There's a lot of food to eat. So with planning, I know that you can rock this gluten-free lifestyle and change your health for the better. It can be done. Absolutely. And so today we're going to go over a couple symptoms because we didn't really hit the symptom list yet. And I printed out a list of 50 symptoms that gluten can cause. And so I'm going to go over them. I won't maybe read every single one, but I'll read the ones, I'll read most of them. And I'll just, here, I have them right here that I printed out. Okay, and like the top 6 are pretty classic. I'm going to start with the classic ones. Number 1 is gas. Okay, gas can be associated with a lot of things, but it can be associated with gluten intolerance as well. Then we have bloating. Bloating was huge for me. If we go back to my story, that was the main thing that sent me into my doctor. I couldn't button my pants, but I wasn't really gaining weight, so that was alarming to me. So that was that inflammation. It just caused inflammation, kind of caused me to blow up the weight in my gut. Then we have diarrhea, classic symptom of celiac disease and wheat intolerance. We have constipation. It can go either way. Gluten intolerance, all food intolerances affect people differently. So it can be constipation. Then nausea. Nausea is a big one, actually. A lot of people struggle with that and don't realize that it's tied with gluten. But if you have nausea, unexplained nausea on and off, absolutely, I would go off of gluten. I mean, that's a red flag right there. That's not even, I don't even think worth thinking about. I'd go off. That is a huge flag of gluten intolerance. And then vomiting and nausea. And so for me, when I got really sick, it was all those things. I was miserable. I mean, I was stuck in my bed. Then abdominal pain. It can cause a lot of pain. Gluten intolerance can. It can be very painful in the gut. So, and belly distension, particularly for kids. I know years ago, 25 years ago, that was one of the main indicators of celiac disease, is the kids not absorbing the minerals and nutrients, and their belly kind of looks like a starving little kiddo because it's so distended. And then we have acid reflux. Acid reflux actually can be caused by gluten and gluten alone. And as we've learned through my husband's story and a friend of ours, grains in general can cause acid reflux. So, and we have kids and babies that have acid reflux right now. So it keeps going from generation to generation. All these symptoms and intolerances are getting stronger in our kids, which is what is really kind of frightening, and why we really want to get control of it, and why the whole family really should be gluten-free, because it's not helping our kids. There's rashes. A lot of people don't know this, but there's actually a gluten rash in particular, and I believe a lot of it's kind of around the belly or the torso, but it may show up anywhere. But gluten intolerance ties in with lots of skin issues. So we have rashes, eczema, acne, psoriasis, rosacea, all those different skin diseases can be caused by gluten, or conditions, I should say. Then this is huge, brain fog. If you have brain fog, ribbit. If you have brain fog, yes, absolutely. That's another, I would say, almost no-brainer. If you have brain fog, I'm not even going to say brain fog. Get off the gluten, because it's a huge contributing factor to not being able to think clearly. And then headaches and migraine. I have known so many people who have gone off of gluten and gotten rid of their headaches and migraines. So if you have that, that is a strong indicator of a gluten intolerance. There's also hot flashes, and then fatigue. Fatigue is another red flag. Bing, ding, 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 ding. If you have fatigue, that's another kind of no-brainer. That's another hot one where I'd say if you're dealing with fatigue, I would get off the gluten, because that is really a big gluten. That's a popular symptom for gluten. And that one was well, they were all alarming for me, but that was like crazy to me, because I literally could not move. And everybody has it in different intensities. So it's different for everyone. It really depends with how much stress you have and what's going on. And you can have them all, you can have none. And research has shown that just because you don't show symptoms from gluten intolerance, it doesn't mean that you're not intolerant. So what I'm trying to say is that the severity of the symptom, because I get really sick, but the scientists have found just because you get really sick from intolerance and somebody's like got a mild, maybe stomachache or something, the severity doesn't necessarily go with me. It could go with the less symptom. The person who's experiencing the less symptoms could be have more damage from the gluten, is what I have read. So if you do have any of these symptoms, you kind of want to take it seriously, I guess is what I'm saying. Feeling tired after eating a meal that contains gluten, so that tiredness. So you're feeling pretty good, and your food should actually fill you and give you energy, make you feel better. So if you're tired afterwards, that would be another symptom that I would say. If that's you, I would definitely go off of gluten. Fibromyalgia. that's another one that I would go off of gluten too, because that's just pain throughout the entire body, totally linked with gluten. Inflammation, that's the number one reason probably to not eat gluten, is inflammation in the body. Because inflammation causes all sorts of disorders and diseases and problems. And there's a lot of things that can cause it. And we really want to keep it away. And gluten is just known, that's one of the main things that it causes. All these other problems are probably linked, I would guess, maybe to the inflammation that it's causing inside the body. Joints and pain swelling, huge for gluten. If you're struggling with that as well, I can't tell you, so many people I talk to go off of gluten and they have no pain. They used to have pain all over their body. And once they go off of gluten, that joint pain is gone. It's low immunity, osteoporosis, canker sores, broken teeth, which is really interesting because my husband and his family have problems with broken teeth that they just break. And he, is now grain-free. So I'm sure he was gluten intolerant for most of his life. And probably the family, I would guess, has significant symptoms as well. Depression goes hand in hand with those carbs, addiction to carbs. I haven't met anybody yet who has depression and is not addicted to carbs. So you really want to get off those carbs because it just messes with the whole chemistry of the brain, basically. Mood swings, oh my gosh, and working with kiddos. I work in a clinic with kiddos. And I can't tell you how many they put kids on a gluten-free diet and the opposition melts away. It can make kids really oppositional. So if you're struggling with a kiddo who's extremely oppositional, I would try them on a gluten-free diet and see if that helps, because we have seen that help often. Inability to focus, which ties in with that brain fog, ADHD, dizziness, and trouble balancing is intolerance to gluten. We have infertility. 7 years infertility. I have no doubt that was part of my infertility issues. I don't know if they really know exactly why it causes that, but lots of infertility issues. Abnormal menstrual cycles. I didn't really know mine was abnormal until I was trying to get pregnant. Very abnormal. And even with my daughter, I had mentioned she went gluten-free and her menstrual cycles were wacky. They were triggering all the time. They came every 2 weeks, on and off. It was like kind of nuts. When she went gluten-free, every month, 3 days, boom, over. It was nuts how it just hurt hormones, how gluten affected the hormones. PMS, tooth decay, weight loss, weight gain, and it can really affect sleep. I would watch that. I've heard of a lot of people that say, that they don't think that they're really affected with gluten, but when they start monitoring, it's like, you know what, I don't think I sleep well after I eat gluten. So it can be poor sleep. And then night blindness, that one I have never heard of, but I don't see very well at night. So maybe that is it. So that is a pretty solid list of symptoms that you can look at, and just for interest note to see if you struggle with any of those things. And I honestly, from the mass majority of people that I talk to and friends, most people have these symptoms or a combination of various symptoms. When you really start talking to people, it seems like everybody's fine, but when you really start talking to people, they're really taking a lot of medications and dealing with a lot of things if you really start talking to them personally. So everybody's not really fine. I think that's a falsity. They're just dealing with it the only way that they maybe know how. But there's lots that you can do holistically to help change all that, to get off the medication. And eating healthy is like the number one thing that you can do. So there we have it. So as we wrap up our 3-day challenge, I want you to make sure to give yourself credit for being here again. I mean, this is awesome that you're here and you're acknowledging the steps to help you commit to a gluten-free lifestyle. You're digging in deeper. You want to improve your health through diet, and every little bit counts. So everything you're doing is awesome, no matter what you're doing for your health. Eating healthy, eating whole foods, editing out the gluten, even if it's not completely dedicated gluten-free, that's awesome. You're doing a great job. So make sure to acknowledge that for yourself. Don't beat yourself up. That is super awesome. And just know that if you're ready to take the next big step in going dedicated gluten-free and want support getting there, along with a little bit of hand-holding, then I have a 3-month Food Freedom for Life program. There's a 3-month and 6-month program. And so we kind of work in different phases. And so the first phase that I work with is where we try to lock in that commitment for you, for your health and what you want for your life. And then together we really dig deep on those foundational beliefs. We go back and I help you to identify these blocked emotions that started in childhood. And then once we identify them, we acknowledge them, we work on processing them. We have different ways that we can process them and let them go. And then it helps you to move out of that fear. All these emotions are kind of trapped in fear. That's how we know that they are blocks if they have this fear around them. And so once we move out of fear, then we can embrace our strength and kind of move forward and empower ourselves to take charge of our diet. So that's a big part of phase 1. And then when we work on phase 2, we work on creating that plan. And that plan is catered to your lifestyle and your needs. And we'll work on different menu plans that are easy, shopping lists, and kind of get you set up. We'll work out, figure out how to find some easy snacks, some good breakfast, lunch, and dinners that you can kind of whip up quickly. And we'll create shopping lists and help you get ready to go. And so then phase 3 is the implementation part. And so where we set you flight and I support you as you dig into this gluten-free lifestyle. And you'll have a plan of action and you'll be educated and you'll have all the basics of going gluten-free so that you can find success in your food freedom. And so whether or not that you're interested in this program, I'm also offering right now a free 30-minute food freedom breakthrough session with me where we can dig deep if you want and kind of discover that childhood block maybe, or emotional block, that foundational belief that is subconsciously blocking maybe you from reaching your goals, or we can set up the next step for a plan in attaining your gluten-free lifestyle. And so that's a free 30-minute session. And if you're interested in that, you can just instant message me or I guess I'll say, I'll put a link in Facebook for that free 30-minute call. This is a special call. I'm clearing my calendar for a couple blocks so that I can meet you personally and help you on your journey. And I'll also, for people who are watching on Zoom, I'll send out an email that has the calendar link so that if you're interested in taking advantage of the special offer and want help in taking that next step and going gluten-free and meeting with me for a 30-minute breakthrough session, I'll have that link for you. So our health is honestly one of the most important things that we have. If we don't have that, we don't really have a whole lot else. And so your time and investment in your health will only empower you to have the best life that you can have. So I really want that for you, and I'm honored to share this journey with you. So thank you. You are awesome, and you're doing all the right things, and you're in the right place. Don't beat yourself up. You're awesome. Embrace health. So before we close out, though, we had a little contest. And so I want to, first of all, reveal the prize. And I have here food, Mark Hyman's food book. It's called What the Heck Should I Cook? What the Heck Should I Eat? Perfect. He's one of the leading gut nutritionists that I follow. And this is one of his second books. And so this is loaded with lots of awesome information and recipes. And so the winner, then I'm announcing the winner of our contest, who has followed along and been at our Zooms and been at the lives and commented on all our questions, is Stacy Marie. Yay! So Stacy, I know you're not watching live at this moment, but I will contact you and we'll get you set up so that I can mail you your prize. But thank you everyone for joining me on this Mythbuster 3-day challenge. And I look forward to connecting with you again. And may you be blessed in your journey to health. Goodbye.